Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And we are very excited to showcase this next guest here on our network, so sit back, strap in, and get ready for a wonderful ride. And on the line with us today, we have Jenny Ferns. We're going to be discussing her wonderful book, Ripple Effect, Because of the War. Available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And people, listen. Jenny was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best publishers in the business. Sweet Spire Literature Management. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, make sure you're doing yourself a wonderful favor and you're contacting Sweet Spire. You can find out more information on their fantastic company at sweetspireliterature.com. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Jenny here on the line. Now, the moment you go to her Amazon page, her Barnes & Noble page, you start to do any research on her book, you instantly understand what we're discussing today. Now, it's a historical fiction narrative, okay? So, constructed with the emphasis on entertainment, but it comes from real life history and it's influenced based upon true events. Now, I'm really looking forward to it. You guys know I'm a history buff, okay? So this is something right up my alley. I absolutely love learning about history. World War II definitely is right up there. But also looking for a book to add to the shelves because I don't know about you guys, but let's call a spade a spade. Given the past 2.5 going on what feels like 40 years now that we've all been experiencing this pandemic and the variations of lockdown that we've encountered, I don't know about you, but I have been yearning for an exit. I've been yearning for something to take me out of the day-to-day monotony that has become this COVID living situation. And this book is the perfect exit strategy. So sit back, strap in, have your notebooks ready, and get ready for a fantastic ride because that's exactly what we have in store for you today. Jenny is the expert. She's written the book. She's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's get it started. Jenny, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you?
Hi, Benji. I'm great. Thanks for asking me.
Absolutely. Well, Jenny, thank you for being a guest, okay? Because we're absolutely looking forward to this. Again, we know, covering the most basic step, when it comes to war, and I know your book revolves around World War II, but when it comes to war, the effects that it has, not only on the individual soldiers that fight in the war, but the families around them is devastating. And
Correct.
War is something that is all too common within our human family. So this is something that is going to be right up the alley. It's going to be something that so many people can resonate and really reflect upon. So I'm really excited to hear your words on why you wrote the book, the influence that it had on you, and so on and so forth. But before we go into all of that, Jenny, let's start off by learning a little bit more about you. Tell our listening audience about your background, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, I grew up in England, and I was a baby boomer. And you can tell I've got a British accent still, even though I live in the United States and spent some time in Canada. I still sound British. And I grew up in a fairly privileged environment, private girls' schools in England. And I had a passion for biology. And psychology was somewhere there because my parents were psychologists and social workers. But primarily, my passion was biology. And I emigrated to Canada and taught in high school in Canada and worked with a very famous naturalist called Gerald Durrell. At least he's famous in Britain. He worked with endangered species. And then I had a close friend who became an alcoholic. So I retrained and became a counselor and then a psychologist specializing in alcohol and addiction and recovery and post-traumatic stress disorder and family dysfunction. So all that is the background that I bring into my story. I go into my vaults of different personalities and my memories of my family and people around me as they were recovering from the effect of war and heard their stories. So a lot of it is based on my skill set, my knowledge, and also family stories and personal stories in my life and people around me.
Fantastic. You know, Jenny, there's so much that I can reflect upon. I'm going to hold off on my reflections. Let's just keep it moving. Let's jump right in. Ripple effect. Because of the war. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Well, I started writing a memoir when I came down to Florida and thought I was going to retire. And, you know, writing is actually hard work, I discovered. And as I was writing my memoir, I realized that I was going to rattle a lot of skeletons in the closet of my family, and some people were still alive. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write a fictional story. I'm going to take some of the stories that I heard, some of the secrets that were in my family and other people around me, and bring them out, but not make it so that people were identifiable or that the secrets were identifiable. So I started writing. I started totally over again and started writing historical fiction, primarily for women, but also the men who have read it feel they identify with some of the characters in it.
Wow. You know, let's talk about inspiration, because we've already started to go into that in a little detail, really starting from a very broad perspective. Jenny, was writing something that you always found that you had a hobby for, a liking to? Talk to us about where the love for creative writing comes from. Were there artists that inspired you? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Well, actually, creative writing really wasn't part of my life. I was an avid reader forever, and I had to write for my profession, writing reports and things like that. So my creativity started when I was starting to write my memoir, and then when I decided to start again, when I came to Florida and to the villages, I discovered that there are critique groups here and writers groups, and a huge number of writers groups. So I joined a critique group and showed my first few pages, and I got back a lot of red marks, you know, just like when you do in school and the teacher sends you back all the red marks and you have things that are wrong and you
I remember that.
And I think, oh my God, you know, I'm a terrible writer. However, with the learning that I had from listening to other people's work being critiqued and the critique that I got from my writing, I learned certain things certain skills and certain techniques that I really didn't know about. For example, point of view. Who's talking right now? Are you talking from inside the person, or are you are you observing what somebody is saying? Yeah, are you talking, is it active or is it passive? And, you know, little grammatical errors that I made. And then after a little while, I actually found I was getting fewer red marks coming back. And then after a little while, one of the leaders in the group said, Jenny, I think now you're a writer, so keep going. And that really boosted me. And the support of all the people in the group over a period of several years of critiquing, editing, I actually finally completed my manuscript. I couldn't have done it without the critique group. Absolutely. And the creative aspect was very surprising, because I found that I would be dreaming conversations with my characters. I would be having conversations with my characters as if they were real people. And sometimes the characters wanted to do things that I didn't want them to do. And sometimes, you know, I wanted them to do things and they said, no, I'm not doing that. Right. So it became a very strange process.
They built up a life of their own, right? They built up a life of their own.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, Jenny, I love it. Sticking with inspiration, but now getting more specific to your book, Ripple Effect.
Right.
We know, as you stated before, this was a book that you wanted to write, and you knew that you were potentially going to ruffle some feathers. So you made it a historical narrative.
Right.
Now, I'm curious, Jenny, why did you feel compelled to write this book and to put it out for the public? Because, I mean, this could have been something you very easily wrote and stayed on your shelf. You wanted to put it out for the public to partake in as well. I'm curious, what did you see about the words you were putting on the page that made you feel this would be beneficial to your readers?
Probably the first thing was the PTSD aspect, that people come back from the war, and in those days it was mostly men who came back from the Second World War. They go in as one character, loving and caring and open, and they come back and they're shut down, and they have, they don't want to talk about their traumas. They don't want to share that. They don't want to relive it because it's too horrific. And then alcoholism and drug addiction begins to kick in because as a way of coping. And because they are changed coming back into the family doesn't know quite how to deal with that. So it creates a lot of stress within the family. And that was the number one piece that I wanted to share with people, that the primary character in my story actually finally could recover from addiction and recover from PTSD. Yeah. So that was the piece that I think is relevant now and always will be, about how that affects family and people around you, and that there is some hope there. Absolutely. And then there's some other threads within the story that are really important, that some people find inner strength to go through war and survive through war, inner strength that they never knew that they had. Particularly in those days, back in England in the 30s and 40s, the women pretty much, a lot of the women were stay-at-home traditional wives, not necessarily working. But they stood in the place of men when they had gone. They took over their jobs and they began to show some strength and to survive. I mean, for example, some women went and worked on the farm. City women went to work on the farm. Mm-hmm. Women went to drive ambulances and pick up dead bodies. So they survived, and they learned how to survive during all those stresses of war when they had to, when the men were away.
Right. Guys, again, here on the line with Jenny Ferns, we're discussing her wonderful book, Ripple Effect, Because of the War. Available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. You know, Jenny, next point that I want to go into, and it's borderline unfair to ask you this question because it's so broad. But I'm going to take the opportunity, I'm going to put it out there, and please entertain me and my listening audience here. One of the first things that you said in your previous answer was you wanted to really address PTSD and the effects of that. And I think amongst so many other issues that your book tackles, PTSD is up there as probably one of the most important to really acknowledge and to really be understanding of. And we know that, again, your book is revolving around World War II and the effects that had on individuals and individuals' families. But Jenny, as unfortunate as it is, I mean, we don't have to look very far. I mean, here in the States, we were at war for years with our soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan. Right now, currently with Russia and Ukraine, and who knows how things are going to continue to develop with that. But we know war is something that, as unfortunate as it may be, seems to be inevitable. So there's a lot of individuals that are continuing to be affected by PTSD from their experiences from war. Jenny, through your research, for our listening audience right now, anybody that has been through war themselves or has a family member that is battling PTSD, are there any words of wisdom that you would be able to relate to them on how to overcome or deal with some of that trauma?
Well, first of all, the person suffering from PTSD needs to start talking and find a safe place to do that with a counselor, psychologist, or something. The brain gets affected, it gets hot-wired. There are nightmares, and addiction and alcoholism is sort of turned to as a band-aid to try and calm the inner demons and the memories from the past. So to start talking, to start going to an AA group, go to a psychologist, talk to somebody and find ways in which to calm calm the body, to calm the brain, because it's all being dysregulated. And there is hope, but it is a bit of a long road.
Yeah,
and the people, the families that are living or being touched by this, they don't understand it, and they have a hard time. So that very often there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of abuse, and alcoholism would be the prime one, but there's also other nasty drugs that are going around now, heavy duty ones. It's really hard to get off. So I need to start with the addiction and start talking. Go to a treatment center, talk to somebody, because the ripple effect, see, it not only affects the one person from the war or PTSD, but affects everybody else around. So it's even down to children. So the ripple effect is, it goes on, and it's intergenerational too.
Yeah. You know, Jenny, that's why I love the title of your book, Ripple Effect. The imagery that comes to mind is beautiful, but also when you're talking about this trauma, when you're talking about PTSD, we don't know how far those ripples extend. And that is what is so important, because what you're talking about here, people, listen, you got to find a way to express. You got to find outlets to talk to people, right? Absolutely. To get those things out, because when you keep them in and they're left there to just fester, grow and develop and evolve, you don't know how far those things will go and who they will affect. I absolutely love that. Jenny, what would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating prior to embarking upon the journey?
Well, there's a couple of things. I don't know how much time you have, but
we have as much time as you need, Jenny.
What?
I said we have as much time as you need.
All right. There's another theme within this, that in England, when the men were away, this is talking about mostly London, and some of the industrial centres where the men went to war, because the women were alone and without men for a long period, without their husbands for a long period of time, there was a lot of extramarital sex between married women and some of the soldiers, some of the American soldiers who were over there, and a lot of single women also would have connections with the American soldiers, and so. Some of them, it worked well, and then they moved to America or to some other place. Sometimes it didn't work well. But there were a lot of illegitimate children born. And that is one theme within this book, too, about independent women and the beginning of the sexual freedom that they had, and without necessarily, and dealing with the consequences of that. And that is a little piece of the skeleton within my family, because there was one of my family members who was one of those illegitimate children and was adopted out to another family. So I have that theme within the story, and it's a girl who has been adopted by her aunt and doesn't know she's been adopted until her real mother shows up many, many years later, announcing that, this is her mother. But the secret of how the child was conceived from, a soldier, actually, who knows? The mother doesn't know which soldier it was. So those were secrets that were held within the family in this story. And so it deals with secrets and needing to talk and come out into the open and deal with the trauma of that, and developing some way of recovering and getting your feet back on the ground when you discover things that have happened. So that was another ripple effect of the war, with personal relationships falling to pieces and new relationships forming and children being born.
Jenny, listen, this is profound. I mean, the themes themselves are amazing. Listen, this is something taken directly out of a Hollywood film, okay? I would not be surprised if we saw this on the television screen.
I would like that, of course.
Because this is incredible.
Let me tell you the ripple effect of that.
Yeah.
Well, my husband read the book, and he remembered that a girlfriend of his when he was in high school, had an illegitimate child that was adopted out, because in those days there was a lot of shame. Single mothers weren't accepted. So, she was shuffled off somewhere, had the baby adopted out. Yeah. And anyway, he contacted her and said, well, what happened to that baby? It wasn't his baby, by the way. It was just a friend. He said to her, what happened to that child? She said, I don't know. I've always been wondering what happened to him. But, I lost touch. I mean, I wasn't allowed to have any information. It was in those days, the records were closed. Yeah. And so he said, well, if you knew, would you want to contact him? And she said, yeah, I've been waiting my whole life, wondering what had happened to him, but never thought I'd ever contact him. Anyway, my husband did some research and found out information about the records, and she made a request to meet her child, and they met. So and she was very happy, and she was totally delighted. And that was because I wrote the book, and my husband then helped somebody else. That was another ripple effect.
Jenny, there you go. You got book number 2. I mean, listen, this is...
Yeah, that's right.
Guys, this is... you know what? I'm going to hold up. I always have to remind myself, Benji, this is not about you. I have so many questions. Jenny, listen, as we start to close out of this wonderful interview, what is next for you? I mean, what's on the horizon? Do we have any other books?
Okay, first, I do need to say that I won a prize.
Yeah, you should say that. Absolutely. What prize did you win?
And it was called the Royal Palm Literary Awards Competition. It's the Florida Writers Association.
Congratulations.
And I won first prize for historical fiction, women's fiction.
Wow.
So that was good.
That's incredible.
I took a break from writing that because it was a lot of work, because I had to make sure that I got the dates right and all that kind of thing for, the Blitz of London and, VE Day and all of that sort of stuff. I had to get, and what people were wearing, because I wrote about a period just before when I wasn't alive. So I started in the war years, so I didn't know a lot of that stuff, but just from memory and pictures. Right. So I did a lot of research. So that was work. So I thought, well, I'm going to write something that's going to be easier and lighter. So I started writing fairy stories. Oh my goodness, it's just work too. Because you still have to write properly, and you have to write age appropriately, and
There's a lot that goes into it.
I wrote 2 fairy stories. They're loosely based on Alice, and I grew up with Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. That's British girls' stories that we grew up with. So I've written 2 fairy stories that are kind of like that. I kind of think of them as cartoony. I have a princess and dragons and the prince of the bees and, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Guys, listen, it's the gift.
That was fun. That's fun. But I've written 2 manuscripts. I've got one is called Princess Rose in the Wild Woods, and the second one is called Princess Rose, Magic or Medicine. So it's got some biology in it, and, the life of bees and how important they are and all that sort of stuff.
Fantastic. Listen, I truly mean it's the gift that keeps on giving. Fictional narratives, all with a wonderful education hidden underneath.
That's right.
Do yourself a favor, people. Amazon, Barnes & Noble is where you have to go. Jenny Ferns is the author you have to thank for bringing this fantastic book to your table. And Ripple Effect, Because of the War, is the title you have to pick up. Listen, I said it before, I'm going to say it again. You surely will not be disappointed. Let's grow, let's develop, let's educate ourselves, and it starts with this amazing narrative. Jenny, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you once again for being a guest with us on People of Distinction.
Thank you, Benji.
Come and be a guest with us on People of Distinction.